Spy High Mission 1 by A.J. Butcher. Chapter 1. Ben and Lori stood up on the cliff top. Hundreds of meters below them, they could hear the restless crash of the midnight surf against the rocks. But in the absence of the moon, they could see nothing. Only the silver of their suits gleamed dully and seemed to shiver as they prepared themselves. To anyone who didn't know them, they could have been brother and sister, both tall, athletic, her hair blonde and long, his cropped short. But they weren't brother and sister. Far from it. "How much time do we have?" "About an hour." "Plenty, if the others manage to keep up." Ben turned his back to the cliff's edge and the sheer drop below. "Follow my lead." He threw himself off the cliff. Lori sighed. That was so Ben. He always had to go first, and without even a kiss. She'd remembered the next time he came looking for a little lip action. But first things first. Repressing an urge to whoop her excitement while she did it, Lori too flung herself into thin air. For the flimsiest of moments, as she gained the highest point in her leap, Lori seemed to hover far above the swirling ocean, as if gravity itself were pausing, considering whether to exert its weight on her or not. She thought of the Coyote character in the old Roadrunner cartoons. How many times he was left suspended and gasping in midair before plummeting to the bottom of a canyon. Still, as gravity decided not to make an exception for Lori Angel, she started her plunging acceleration towards certain death. She had one rather important advantage over the Coyote. Lori swung on a rope clipped tightly to her belt, arched towards the black slab of the cliff, and relaxed her muscles as she had been taught. The impact barely winded her. Her feet and fingers fixed themselves to the rock. No problem. If only the Coyote had been trained at Spy High, his whole career might have been very different. A light-hearted wink at her farther down the cliffside, like a boy giving her the eye. That would be Ben. No doubt he'd already found the entrance to the tunnel and claimed it for the greater glory of himself. Lori repelled towards him. "Took your time," Ben commented. He had already unclipped his line and crouched in the narrow tunnel like a sprinter eager for the gun. "I was admiring the view." "Yeah, well, point your baby blues this way." Ben jabbed his finger towards the deep, circular darkness. 100 meters to Stromfeld's complex. Let's put them behind us. "So keen to save the world," Lori observed, with more than a hint of sarcasm. "That's right," muttered Ben. "And if we reach the core before Daly, so much better." "Talk about the short straw," grumbled Jennifer Chin as she scrambled deeper beneath the earth, the roughly hewn tunnel showing no sign of coming to an end. Ben and Lori get to rappel. Callie and Eddie get the sea approach. And what do we get? The chance to crawl on our bellies all the way to the complex. She paused briefly to sweep the hair from her eyes. How come we always get the short straw? Jake Daly, keeping close behind Jennifer, said nothing, though the expression beneath his tangled mop of black hair suggested that he had a good idea. He forced Stanton's smug face from his mind. Concentrate on the mission, he reminded himself. Only the mission matters. "I just hope some of Stromfeld's goons get in my way," Jennifer warned darkly. "I've got a lot of tension I need to work off." Jake frowned. "Forget it. We need to access the core as quickly and as quietly as possible. We don't want any diversions." "Says you. Me? I say what's a mission without a chance to break some faces?" "Hey, Jake." Jennifer stopped, rapping her fist on the surface in front of her. The sound rang metallically. "We're in." "We're in?" Jake allowed himself a grim kind of grin, nothing too elaborate or emotional. They reached the fringe of Stromfeld's headquarters. As the steel plating of the tunnel now testified, there was a long way to go yet. They slithered across the polished metal plates. The light improved as they neared the main body of the complex, allowing Jake a rather more explicit view of his partner's rear as she wriggled her way forward. Jake was relieved that Eddie was not in his position at this particular moment. Jennifer paused, this time because she couldn't go any further. A wire grill blocked the intruder's path. She coiled back on herself and hissed to Jake, "Where's this supposed to lead again?" "An empty storeroom," he supplied, "according to the blueprints." "Then send the blueprints back," Jennifer whispered, "and make that a very occupied storeroom." She indicated with her thumb. Jake peered through the grill. A guard, uniformed and helmeted in black, and more worryingly equipped with a large and probably well-serviced laser rifle, was settling himself down on a packing case. They hadn't planned for this. One problem at a time, Jake reminded himself. Take nothing for granted. "What's he doing?" Jennifer mouthed. By way of answer, the guard eased off his helmet and felt in his pocket, drawing out a packet of cigarettes and a lighter. "Unscheduled work break?" chuckled Jake. "Naughty boy. Well, we'll only have to wait. Sit quietly and—" "You can forget that," scoffed Jennifer. "I'm out of here." "Wait." Jennifer didn't. Her feet smashed into the grill, sent it spinning across the storeroom and slamming into the far wall. The guard choked on his first drag of a cigarette, struggled to stand, and groped for his gun. He wasn't quick enough. Jennifer dropped lithely from the vent, smiled at the gape of astonishment on the man's face, and then lashed out with her right leg pivoting on her hip. The kick struck the guard squarely on the side of the head. With a faint groan, he clattered to the floor. He didn't get up. "Somebody should have told you," Jennifer tutted. "Smoking's bad for your health." They dragged the dinghy up onto the shingle and over where the angle of the lurching rock would hide, and then crouched in the shadow of the same rock to take stock. Eddie Neligan didn't look good. His naturally reddish complexion tinged with green. "Water," he said with a moan, "should be strictly reserved for washing with. That's not an ocean. It's nature's way of making you throw up. Why can't we have missions to nice, sunny, tropical islands in the middle of nice, calm, flat seas? What's the fascination with shaky tides in the middle of the night?" "Eddie," prompted Callie Cross, "do the words 'let's keep' and 'moving' mean anything to you?" "I mean, it's not asking much, is it? Look at the Bond movies. An island like Dr. No's wouldn't be too bad, would it? Great beach, bit of a waterfall, a few palm trees. There's got to be an island like that owned by a full-time nut somewhere in the real world, hasn't there? Why can't they send us there? And if they could throw in a Bond girl as well, that'd sure increase my motivation." "Afraid you'll just have to put up with me," said Callie. "And as for motivation, if you don't get moving, I'm going to be motivating you by squeezing somewhere that hurts." "Callie," Eddie said, drooling, "do you know how long I've waited for you to say that?" But he got to his feet and followed his partner just the same. They moved as smoothly and silently as they could across the craggy scrape of the shore that spilt out of the cave. Callie glanced up at the cliff, wondering how the other pairs were faring in their joint mission. Returning her gaze to the mouth of the cave, much closer now, she wondered whether they, too, were finding further progress barred by Stromfield's men. There were two of them, armed and looking as alert as could reasonably be expected of someone on guard duty at midnight. "We could try and creep past them," she suggested to Eddie. "I don't do creeping," he returned. "It makes me feel like I've got something to hide. Besides, these guys have been working really hard and can use a bit of rest. I think we could help them with that." "Sleep shot?" "Sleep shot. You want the one on the right or the left?" In unison, Eddie and Callie raised their right arms. Starlight glittered on shiny metal wristbands. They lowered their hands and pointed their wrists at their respective targets. With hardly an audible put, tiny twin projectiles spat from their wristbands. The countless hours of practice paid off. The sleep shot shells buried themselves in the guards' bare cheeks. They drilled into the skin, immediately releasing a powerful anesthetic into the bloodstream. Neither man would wake before dawn. "Nighty-night," crooned Eddie. "Sleep tight and don't let the bedbugs bite." "Hey, Eddie," Callie said exasperatedly, "before you start breaking into bedtime stories, we've got work to do, remember?" Eddie eyed the forbidding-looking cave and the cliff piled high above it. "How could I forget?" he said. "I hope Stromfeld's got an elevator." "These corridors look all the same," groaned Lori in frustration. "Do you think Stromfeld bought them all in one big job lot at the corridor sale somewhere?" "Don't you pay attention in psychology, Lori?" Ben grunted. It's the mentality of a megalomaniac. Studies have shown that would-be rulers of the world are almost always deeply obsessive and can't tolerate change. That's why they want to impose their will on the rest of us. Keeping every area of his complex identical is Stromfeld's way of proving he's in control and can dictate even the appearance of the environment. "That's another grade A essay in the making there, Ben," said Lori. "But even if you're right, that's not much good to us. Unless Stromfeld's put up signposts, we don't have a clue which way to go to the core." Lori had a point. She and Ben had penetrated Stromfeld's underground headquarters straightforwardly enough, using the tunnel from the cliffside leading to the little-used section of the complex. But since they'd spent a good 20 minutes wandering an apparently inexhaustible supply of featureless metal corridors, and when you were working under a deadline, a serious deadline, that was not good. At least they hadn't encountered any of Stromfeld's goons yet, though Lori was beginning to hope that they might run into one of them soon, if only to ask directions. Ben was frowning. He tended to take even the slightest note of criticism personally. Okay, so they hadn't quite made the progress he expected, but he'd put money on the others being further behind. They had to be. "I thought I'd memorized the blueprints, but I guess there's no harm in activating the belt brain." He pressed a stud in his belt. A beam of light stabbed from the buckle and resolved itself into a holographic image of the floor plan of the complex. 3 pairs of red dots flashed at various points on the plan. "There's us," Lori pointed, as delighted as if she were meeting an old friend. "Yeah, and there's the core," observed Ben, "the nerve center of Stromfeld's entire operation. And there are Jenny and Daly, closer to the core than we are." Lori thoughtfully completed Ben's sentence for him. Not looking happy, Ben pressed his belt stud a second time. Now a flashing red line appeared on the plan, starting from the 2 circles that represented himself and Lori, and leading, like someone tackling a maze in a puzzle book, to the core. Their path was mapped out for them. All they had to do was follow it. "Ben," Lori was already starting to move off. "Weren't we in a rush?" Apparently not. Ben stood motionless, scrutinizing the hologram, paying particular attention to the distance between Jake and Jennifer and the core on one hand, and the distance between him and Lori and the core on the other. Assuming he and Lori obeyed the recommended route, Ben estimated that there was no chance they could get to their destination before the other 2, and that was not an acceptable outcome. If, however, he and Lori took a right up ahead instead of a left, then they'd save time for sure. Save time and get a jump on Daly. He strode forward purposefully. Ben?" Lori tried again. "The belt says left." "Yeah, well, I say right." "Excuse me?" "The routes have been worked out by the logistic guys at Spy High." "And none of them are here in Stromfeld's lair with us," Ben pointed out. "They don't know. They can't tell us what to do." To emphasize the fact, he pressed his belt stud once more. The hologram collapsed meekly on itself, leaking back into his belt like water down a drain. "We're on our own, and we'll save time if we go the way I say. We'll complete the mission more quickly." I don't know, Ben. They ran all kinds of tests to find the clearest routes. Lori's brow creased in doubt. It's called innovative, Lori, Ben urged. Come on, trust me, okay? I need you. And she was persuaded. When Ben gazed at her like that, earnestly, piercing, like he could see right into her heart, she couldn't resist him at all. When he looked at her that way, she'd do anything, even if he told her to go knock on Stromfield's door himself. And in that context, taking a right instead of a left didn't seem like such a big deal after all. Especially as the corridor into the two of them bore some kind of identification. C Alpha. Apparently Ben was right. C for core, she suggested, pleased by the renewed expression of eager determination on his face. C for closer, that's for sure. Ben paused by the door, whipped a deactivator from his belt, and placed it over the lock mechanism. We're almost there. But as the deactivator did its work, Lori found those annoying doubts returning. Why was this area shaded on the plans? The door slid open. Ben grinned and offered Lori his hand. They stepped through. At least a dozen laser rifles pointed directly at them. "Welcome," said a voice. "How nice of you to drop by." It wasn't often that intruders were so accommodating as to walk right into the guard room. A series of dull thuds echoed down the corridor. Jake tensed. "Do you get the feeling something bad just happened?" He sniffed the artificially regulated air as if the stench of something rotten had just wafted through it. He grimaced. "I don't like it." Jennifer sensed nothing amiss, but even though she'd only known Jake for a short time, less than a term, she was already beginning to trust his instincts. There was something preternatural about him, something almost animal. She tensed her limbs for action. Glanced behind. The corridor gaped innocently empty in both directions. "You think that guard might have recovered?" "The way you hit him, I doubt he'll ever recover. And we tied him up pretty good." Jack's expression was dark, intense. "But something's wrong. I'm switching to radar vision." "Agreed." The partners yanked what seemed like thin strips of plastic film from their belts and wrapped them around their heads to cover their eyes. As two ends connected at the back, there was an activating click. The film joined and stiffened, and instantly their fields of vision expanded. By shifting the focus of their eyes only slightly, Jake and Jennifer could now visualize any object, animate or inanimate, that was behind them, on either side of them, or even through the adjacent walls. It was difficult to creep up on a student of Spy High. "How is it for you, Jen?" Jake checked. 360 degrees? Perfect. "I'm seeing the circle." They continued their passage through the endless corridors, moving like shadows. Everything was looking good, but Jake still couldn't shake the premonition that they were on the brink of disaster. Maybe the two figures ahead of them, certainly guards, out of human sight around the corner, but clearly picked out by radar vision, had something to do with it. Jennifer squeezed his shoulder to indicate that she had detected them too. "Sleep shot," said Jake. Jennifer shook her head. "Sorry, a girl needs her exercise." She was running into the corner before Jake could stop her. He cursed softly under his breath. He had no doubt that Jennifer could deal with a pair of Stromfield's men. In fact, he felt almost sorry for them, but physical combat simply wasn't necessary at this stage. He heard the dull thud of a boot against chin, the meaty chop of a hand on neck. It was like back in the storeroom. Jennifer took too many risks. One of these days, it was going to cost her. Maybe not today. Jake rounded the corner to find her posing over the bodies of two poleaxed lackeys like a hunter with her spoils. "Jake?" She grinned. "You missed all the fun." Jake tore off his radar vision. "This is not supposed to be fun." His voice was cold. Jennifer bridled at the sound of it. "This is supposed to be a mission. We'll always use sleep shot where we can. Sleep shot's effects are guaranteed." What's all this we? Jennifer retorted. You don't own me, Jake. You can't tell me what to do. And let me tell you something. She clenched her fists theatrically. These are guaranteed too. Behind her, a groan. Jen! One of the guards, not quite unconscious, was reaching inside his tunic. Jennifer stamped down on his neck, a mere fraction of a second too late. All around them, stridently, deafeningly, like the net of sound thrown over them, came the blare of the alarm. Eddie and Callie heard it as they arrowed their way into an elevator from the lowest levels of the complex to its very heart. Eddie cocked his ear. Interesting choice of music. Means trouble, Eddie, Callie said unnecessarily. We've got to be ready for anything. Don't worry. Eddie refused to appear concerned. I carry protection with me at all times. The elevator's rise ended almost imperceptibly. Its doors slid open silently. Looks like this is our floor. They edged out onto a trademark Stromfeld corridor cautiously, which was probably just as well. They were greeted by a barrage of laser blasts sparking off the walls beside them, so close that Callie felt her hair singe. Pleased to meet you too, Eddie muttered. A handful of goons charged towards them, firing wildly. If only they'd take the proper aim, they'd be taking out more than just scenery, Eddie mused. But it was probably why those guys had never been promoted beyond the level of hired help. He and Callie didn't make the same mistake. Dropping to one knee in perfect unison, they brought Sleep Shot into play, firing from their wristbands with unerring accuracy. 2 attackers fell. 4, 6. But whether the others might have retreated or never become an issue, the scorch of the laser blast against Callie's boot alerted her to the sudden appearance of reinforcements from the other end of the corridor. Eddie! She cried, firing off a Sleep Shot shell behind her. Too hot for comfort. Let's cool them off, Eddie agreed, darting back into the elevator. Callie leapt after him as the door slid shut. Laser blasts ricocheted off steel, but for the moment the two were safe. Where now? Callie gasped. Eddie jabbed a button and the lift swept upward. There's so many choices. 10th floor, weapons of mass destruction. 12th floor, interrogation and brainwashing. 15th floor, master plans for world domination. It's a great day for the whole family at Stromfeld and Company. He punched the emergency button and the elevator obeyed, lurching to a stop between floors. And that helps us how exactly? Callie demanded. Do we just make polite conversation till they override the system? Eddie appraised his companion thoughtfully. Surely we can make the time pass in a more pleasurable than that. He winked. What about hopping on my back for a start? Eddie, I knew you were twisted, but... Callie, please. Eddie was the shocked innocent. How else are we going to bust the hatch unless you climb on my back to reach it? Huh? If we climb up the cables, Stromfeld's boys won't have a clue where we are. It works in the movies every time. Is that right? Callie said skeptically. Well, let's hope Stromfeld's on the same script. They worked quickly. Callie used the laser cutter from her belt to blow out the hatch, then hauled herself out to balance on the roof. She gazed dubiously up at the yawning elevator shaft and the thick cable as she was expected to scale. Not for the first time, it occurred to her that life had been a lot easier on the street. What are you worried about? Eddie jibed gently as she pulled him through. Just imagine you're back at the gym at Spy High. Callie forced herself to focus. The only thing I'm worried about, she retorted, is you coming up behind me. They climbed steadily, wrapping her feet around the cable and pulling themselves hand over hand. It was just as well that they had no fear of heights. As soon as the elevator was lost in the shaft's general gloom, they passed the dim outlines of several doors before Callie paused and yelled down, "What about getting off here?" "I can't think of any reason why not," Eddie called back. The door slid smoothly open, and a dozen guards trained laser rifles on them. Or maybe I can. Eddie smiled sheepishly at the guard. Elevator engineers? We heard you were having a few problems. Let's look on the bright side, Eddie said. We want to get to the core. That's where we are. I think Mr. Stromfeld deserves a vote of thanks for helping us out. Why don't you just shut up for once, snapped Ben. He didn't share in Eddie's optimism, and there was no logical reason why he should. All right, so the first aim of their mission had been to penetrate the nerve center of Stromfeld's operation, which technically they had done. But the second and most important objective had been to sabotage Stromfeld's equipment before he could launch destructive strikes on major cities. Achieving that was going to be extremely difficult. The 6 members of Bond team had been stripped of their equipment and surrounded by a gaggle of guards, outnumbering them at least 3-1. Ben felt anger and frustration well up in him like a bitter poison. How could they possibly salvage the mission now? How would almost certain failure reflect on his leadership of the team, on his future at Spy High? He had found himself automatically glaring at Jake Daly. At least that was one consolation, however minor. Daly was equally undistinguished position. Jake noticed Ben's stare, but ignored it, concentrating instead on observing the details of the core, specifically the 3 screens, each displaying glittering, gleaming shell of a bomb, trembling and eager to go about its business. Computers were arranged around half the circumference of the room, where bespectacled technicians were tapping in launch procedures. The core was shaped like a funnel, tapering inward to the point above them from which hung a giant black metallic ball that flickered with peaceful green lights. Its purpose, Jake could not guess. Maybe Stromfeld was into mood lighting. One thing was certain, his mood at the moment would be triumphant with a capital T. Triumphant to the point of arrogance and beyond, and arrogant people made mistakes. Jake was happy to wait for Stromfeld to make his. Concentrate, he murmured to the group. Watch for an opening. This wasn't over yet. Ah, my little group of interlopers. The big entrance. Stromfeld swaggered into the core, flanked by his grimmest, meanest-looking guards. So sorry to have kept you waiting, but for the crowning moment of one's life, one has to look just right. Yes? The man who smiled complacently at the Bond team was wobblingly fat. His thinning hair greased down in his forehead. He sported an impeccable manicured, Hitler-esque mustache, no doubt to complement his equally pristine SS uniform. His boots gleamed like they'd spent the last 3 days being polished. Nazi retro? Scoffed Eddie. Is this guy passé or what? Stromfeld regarded Bond's team condescendingly, sighed in exaggerated disappointment, and shook his head. His corpulent jowls quivered. Children, he observed. They send children to distract me? Such foolish merits their destruction, yes. How old are you all? 14? 15? Actually, I'm 35, piped up Eddie, but I exercise every day. Maybe you should try it yourself. Very amusing. For a little boy in his last moments of life, said Stromfeld humorlessly. Perhaps you are wondering why you are not already dead? Yes? Natural generosity? Jake ventured, looking worriedly at Jennifer. There was something caged in her eyes, desperate. They had to act soon, or she was likely to get herself killed. If only Stromfeld would hurry things along. Their captor chuckled ripely, as only a fat man can. Not quite. I know, sneered Ben. As a paid-up member of the Maniacs Anonymous, you want a chance to boast about your master plan, to brag about how it's going to be when you're ruler of the world, master of all that you survey and all that crap. And you need an audience. Pity. It's got to be a captive audience. How perceptive, admired Stromfeld. Perhaps we'll execute you last. Yes. You're just a cliche, Stromfeld, groaned Ben. Play on their vanity, he remembered from spycraft lessons. Puncture their sense of self-importance. Make them mad. You're just an entry in a textbook. A porker in a uniform. Stromfeld waggled a finger as thick as a sausage in Ben's direction and laughed uneasily. What I am, boy, he corrected, is the future. For when my bombs have erased every last vestige of your decadent and degraded culture from the face of the earth, I will build a new society from the ashes of destruction, a society governed only by me, shaped in my image forever. Bit overweight, then? Said Eddie. And that is why you're still alive, to witness the first fiery beginnings of the age of Stromfeld. Technicians! Stromfeld drew himself up massively. Let fly the bombs! Ben! Cried Laurie desperately. The technicians' fingers sped across their consoles. On 1, 2, and all 3 screens a missile launched, rising from their hidden silos and slicing into the air like knives. In minutes, they would reach their target. In minutes, the world would enter a new dark age, unless the Bond team could stop them. Callie, hissed Jake, what do you think? I've seen enough, Callie calculated. I can bring them down. Great, because I've had it with this guy. Wait for it daily, cautioned Ben. Hold them! At Stromfeld's orders, the guards gripped the Bond team's arms more tightly. Wait for what? A miracle? No, fat boy, groaned Jake. The mistake you just made. Ben narrowed his eyes. Let's give these jokers a shock of their lives. The crack of electricity charged the air. The guards holding the teenagers yelped and recoiled as electric current surged from the material of the Bond team's suits and jolted through them. Some collapsed at once. Others needed further encouragement from fist and feet. In case you're wondering, Eddie supplied as he threw one man over his hip and elbowed another viciously in the jaw. They're shock suits. They're not available in shops, but if you send a very large check to Spy High, you never know your luck. Stop them! Stop them! Stromfeld commanded. Protect the computers! The remaining guards waded in, but in such an enclosed space, rifles were useless. They dropped like flies. A sequence of blows from Jennifer and Jake ended the technician's interest in the evening's proceedings, allowing Callie to seat herself at the console and work at breathtaking speed at the keyboard. This was what she was in the group for. She knew her wizardry with all things technological. While others had watched Stromfeld or weighed up the guards, her eyes had been totally devoted to these systems, to assimilating and memorizing what the technicians had done, to girding herself to break the codes and destroy the missiles before they could reach their destination. She punched a final combination. Yes! The bright casing of the first missile blistered and burst, a second sun in the sky. The screen died with it. 2 bombs left. Callie glanced feverishly at the counter. 2 minutes of time. Stromfeld raged at his dreams died around him. He glared at the girl, at the screen, and back at the girl. His puppy eyes narrowed. You! He yelled to a dazed but conscious guard who still had hold of his rifle. Shoot her! At least one of his bombs would get through, and it wouldn't be fair otherwise. The guard took a shaky aim, fired, and a scissor kick from Laurie slammed into him. Somebody screamed. Somebody fell. Stromfeld! What's going on? Cried Callie, not averting her gaze from the screens for a second. We'll deal with it, said Jake. Just get rid of those bombs. Yes, sir. She punched in another code, the second dazzling scar in the sky. A second screen plunged into darkness. Callie clenched her fist in triumph. Only 1 missile left, and 60 seconds of time. Callie saw it arc, descend, accelerate, far below it, not so far below it, land. cities, people, oblivious to their intimate fate. Teeth gritted, Callie redoubled her efforts. The few remaining guards threw their weapons down and their hands up. With Stromfeld gone, there was little point to their fighting on. Who would pay them? Laurie and Eddie herded them together as Ben crossed to Stromfeld's body. He felt like shouting for joy. The mission was on the brink of success, after all. How they'd applaud him back at Spy High. Callie was about to destroy the final missile, and its creator was alive? And grinning, blood trickling from both corners of his mouth. He didn't seem to have a lot to grin about, given the gaping wound in his considerable belly. Maybe the control pad he held in his trembling hands had something to do with it. The pad on which he was punching in numbers. Ben knocked it from his grasp, sent it skittering across the floor. Too late, breathed Stromfeld. Above him, the black metal ball began to ascend. Even as you win, you lose. Its green lights, one by one, were turning red. Another bomb, too big to evade, boy. So down we go to hell together. Yes. Oh my God. Ben didn't care whether Stromfeld's suddenly staring eyes or lolling head meant he was dead or not. He had more pressing priority now. Get over here, everybody, but Callie. What is it? The ball paused some 5 or 6 feet off the floor. A number displayed was counting down from 60, inexorably, inevitably, unstoppably. It's a bomb. It's gonna blow. Callie can't help us. Wait! Callie was crying out. I'm nearly there. She could see the city now, its buildings basking in peaceful afternoon. She could see the victims. Do something, Ben, urged Laurie. Okay. That class we had about bomb defusal. He scrambled for a laser rifle and shot it at the lower part of the metal casing. Callie jumped, for a second distracted, and with less than 60 seconds to play with, that was long enough. For the first and fatal time, her fingers faltered. The faces of the people she didn't know were gazing up from parks and pavements, the bomb upon them like the crack of doom, herself screaming uselessly. Too slow! The screen showed impact. Mushroom clouds branded to Callie's eyes. This can't be happening, Laurie wailed. It can't be! The guts of the metal bomb were exposed, its intestines of wires and cables. The number display was at 35, 34. I know this type of device, Ben was claiming. We studied it in class. It's really very simple, basic. These 2 wires. The others saw them, delicate, deadly. Red, blue. Red detonates the bomb at once. Blue diffuses it. So all we need to do, Ben's fingers fluttered. No! Jake seized Ben's hand in a grip of iron. What do you think you're doing? 21, 20. You're wrong, Ben. It's the other way around. Ben wrenched his hand away fiercely, shoved at Jake. What do you think you're doing? I'm never wrong. Callie, Laurie pleaded. Callie, get over here. But Callie was helpless, wild eyes staring blankly in front of her. Trust me, Ben. This time. No. 10, 9. Will one of you do something? Jennifer shouted. Jake. 5, 4. No. Jake's not leader. I won. Would you believe it? Grunted Eddie. 0. The world turned white.